My name is Serena Whitfield. I am 29 years old. 3 weeks before my wedding, while I was standing in a bridal shop in downtown Philadelphia getting my final dress fitting, my phone rang. It was the venue coordinator at Haverford Estate, the historic mansion where I had booked my ceremony and reception 11 months earlier. Miss Whitfield, I am calling to confirm the cancellation of your event on June 21st. I am sorry. What cancellation? Your mother called this morning. She said the wedding has been called off. She requested a full cancellation and asked that the deposit refund be sent to her address. My hands went cold. The seamstress was still pinning the hem of my dress. The fabric was pooling around my feet like a cloud I was about to fall through. I did not cancel my wedding. There must be a mistake. She gave your booking reference number. She knew the date, the guest count, the menu selections. She was very specific. Before the venue coordinator finished her sentence, my phone buzzed with another call. The caterer, then a text from the florist, then an email from the photographer. All of them had received calls that morning. All from my mother. All with the same message. The wedding is off. Cancel everything. Send the refund to Diane Whitfield at 17 Briar Lane, Ardmore, Pennsylvania. My mother had systematically dismantled my wedding in a single morning. Venue, caterer, florist, photographer, DJ, the bakery that was making our cake, the rental company providing the chairs and linens, every vendor contacted, every contract canceled, every deposit totaling $28,400, redirected to her address, $28,400, the exact amount my grandfather, Arthur Whitfield, had placed in a trust for me before he died. A trust designated, in his words, for Serena's wedding day so she can celebrate the way her grandmother and I did. Surrounded by love. My grandfather died when I was 19. He had been the one person in my family who made me feel like I mattered, not more than anyone else, not less, just equally, just enough. He left that money specifically for me, specifically for my wedding, and my mother had taken it, all of it, in one morning, without telling me, without asking, without a single moment of hesitation, because my brother needed it more. Let me tell you about the Whitfield family, because the wedding is not where the story begins. The wedding is where 29 years of favoritism finally became impossible to ignore. Ardmore, Pennsylvania, a wealthy suburb on the main line west of Philadelphia. Old stone houses, private schools, country club memberships passed down through generations like heirlooms. The kind of town where your last name determines your social calendar and your family's reputation is considered a shared asset. The Whitfields had been on the main line for 3 generations. My great-grandfather founded Whitfield & Associates, a boutique financial advisory firm, in 1947. My grandfather Arthur grew it into one of the most respected wealth management firms in the Philadelphia region. My father, Douglas Whitfield, inherited the firm when Arthur retired in 2005. Douglas was a competent manager, but he was not his father. Where Arthur built relationships, Douglas maintained them. Where Arthur innovated, Douglas preserved. The firm did well under Douglas, but it did not grow. It coasted on the reputation Arthur had built and the clients Arthur had cultivated. My mother Diane was a Bryn Mawr graduate who had married into the Whitfield name with the precision of someone executing a strategic acquisition. She was beautiful, articulate, socially ambitious, and possessed an instinct for status that bordered on predatory. She knew every family on the main line by name, income bracket, and social utility. Together, Douglas and Diane had 2 children. My brother Garrett, born in 1992, and me, born in 1995, 3 years apart. A lifetime of difference in how we were treated. Garrett was the son, the heir, the future of Whitfield & Associates. From the day he was born, the family narrative was written around him like a screenplay. Garrett would go to the best schools. Garrett would earn the right degrees. Garrett would take over the firm. Garrett would carry the Whitfield name forward. Every decision my parents made was filtered through a single question. How does this serve Garrett's future? Private school tuition. Garrett attended the Haverford School, one of the most prestigious prep schools on the main line. $14,000 a year in 1998, rising to $22,000 by the time he graduated. I attended Ardmore Middle School and Lower Merion High School. Public schools. Good public schools, but public nonetheless. When I asked why Garrett went to private school and I did not, My mother said we have to be strategic about our investments, Serena. Your brother's education is an investment in the family's future. An investment. My education was an expense. His was an investment. The language of finance applied to parenting with surgical precision. Summer programs. Garrett attended leadership camps at Wharton and finance workshops at Georgetown. My summers were spent working at a frozen yogurt shop on Lancaster Avenue. College. Garrett went to Villanova, full tuition paid by my parents. $42,000 a year for 4 years, $168,000 total. I went to Westchester University. I paid my own way through scholarships, part-time work, and student loans. My parents contributed nothing. When I asked for help with my junior year tuition, my father said, "Serena, we have already committed our educational budget to Garrett's trajectory. You understand?" I understood perfectly. I understood that in the Whitfield family, there were 2 categories of children: the one who mattered and the one who was expected to manage on her own. But I had Grandpa Arthur. Arthur Whitfield was nothing like his son. Where Douglas was distant and calculating, Arthur was warm and present. Where Diane valued status, Arthur valued character. He wore the same tweed jacket for 30 years. He drove a 15-year-old Volvo. He gave away more money than he spent, and he never once made anyone feel small for having less. He saw me, really saw me, not as the second child, not as the daughter who did not attend private school, not as the one who was expected to manage. He saw me as Serena, complete, worthy, equal. Every Sunday afternoon from the time I was 6 until he died when I was 19, I visited Grandpa Arthur at his stone cottage on Gray's Lane. We sat on his porch and drank lemonade in summer and hot chocolate in winter. He told me stories about building the firm, about my grandmother Helen who died before I was born, about the importance of integrity and the difference between wealth and worth. Wealth is what you accumulate, he told me once. Worth is what you give. Remember that, Serena. Because this family sometimes confuses the two. He set up the trust when I was 17. I did not know about it until after he died. A specific account, held at a specific bank, with specific instructions, $28,400 for Serena's wedding day, to be administered by my attorney Walter Brennan until the beneficiary marries. This money is not part of my general estate. It is not to be redirected, reassigned, or used for any other purpose. It belongs to Serena. He signed it. Walter Brennan notarized it. And for 12 years, that money sat in an account, waiting for me to fall in love and plan a wedding. I fell in love with a man named Thomas Riley, a high school history teacher from Narberth. He was kind, steady, and laughed at my jokes even when they were not funny. He proposed on a Tuesday evening, while we were eating takeout on our apartment floor because our dining table had not been delivered yet. No ring, no fancy restaurant, just a man on his knees holding my hand saying, "I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy." I said yes before he finished the sentence. We set the date, June 21st, 2024. Haverford Estate. 120 guests. My grandfather's trust would cover the deposits and the bulk of the reception costs. Thomas and I would cover the rest from our savings. Everything was planned. Everything was perfect. And then my mother made 7 phone calls in one morning and destroyed all of it. I drove to my parents' house that afternoon, still wearing the bridal shop clips in my hair, because I had forgotten to remove them. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I did not call ahead. I did not announce myself. I walked through the front door of 17 Briar Lane at 2:27 in the afternoon and found my mother sitting at the kitchen island drinking tea and scrolling through her phone as if this were any ordinary Tuesday. She looked up when I walked in. Her expression was calm, prepared. She had been expecting me. "Serena, sit down. You canceled my wedding." My voice came out harder than I intended. "Every vendor, every contract. You called them and canceled everything." She set down her tea. "Because your father and I have made a decision about the family finances that requires a reallocation of certain resources." Reallocation of certain resources. She was talking about my wedding as if it were a line item on a budget report. What reallocation? Garrett has been accepted to Columbia Business School. She said this with the reverence other people reserve for religious experiences. Columbia. Serena. The MBA program, it is the opportunity of a lifetime. And what does that have to do with my wedding? The first semester tuition and fees are $47,000. We have covered the first $19,000 from our savings. The remaining $28,000 needs to come from somewhere. She looked at me with an expression that was simultaneously apologetic and immovable. Your grandfather's trust was the only available option, the trust that Grandpa Arthur left specifically for my wedding. Your grandfather would have understood. An MBA from Columbia will position Garrett to take over the firm. That benefits the entire family. A wedding is one day, his career is forever. You should be grateful we are investing in this family's future. Grateful. She wanted me to feel grateful that she had stolen my wedding money and given it to my brother. Mom, that money was left in trust for me. It was not yours to take. The trust was administered by your father as the family's financial representative. After Walter Brennan retired 3 years ago, he had the authority to make distributions. This was news to me. Walter Brennan, my grandfather's attorney, the man who had been the trustee, had retired, and somehow, without my knowledge, my father had assumed control of the trust. When did Dad become the trustee? It was a natural transition. Walter was getting older. Your father stepped in. It was handled quietly. Quietly, meaning without telling me, without asking the beneficiary of the trust whether she approved of the change in administration. Where is the money now, Mom? It has been wired to Columbia University. Garrett starts in September. My legs went weak. I sat down. Not because she told me to, because I could not stand. $28,400. My grandfather's last gift to me. The money he had set aside with specific instructions that it be used for my wedding, and nothing else. Gone. Sent to an Ivy League business school to pay for my brother's MBA. Does Garrett know? Of course. He is very appreciative. Appreciative. My brother was appreciative that my wedding fund was paying for his degree. And my wedding? My mother smoothed her napkin, a gesture she made when she was about to say something she had rehearsed. Thomas is a good man. He will understand. You can have a smaller ceremony, a courthouse wedding, or you could postpone until you have saved enough on your own. These things do not have to be extravagant, Serena. A courthouse wedding. After 11 months of planning. After booking the venue where my grandparents had celebrated their 40th anniversary. After choosing the menu Thomas and I had tasted together on 3 separate visits. After picking the flowers that matched the ones in my grandmother's wedding portrait. A courthouse wedding, because my brother's MBA was more important than my marriage. I stood. I walked to the door. My mother's voice followed me. Serena, do not make this into something it is not. We are a family. We support each other. Garrett would do the same for you. I turned. No, he would not. And you know it. I walked out. I sat in my car. I did not cry. Something had shifted inside me, something fundamental. The part of me that had spent 29 years seeking approval from people who had already decided I did not deserve it. That part went quiet, and in the silence a different voice emerged. My grandfather's voice. From a porch in Gray's Lane. From a Sunday afternoon a decade ago. This family sometimes confuses wealth and worth. Remember that, Serena. I remembered. And I picked up my phone and made one call. Walter Brennan, my grandfather's attorney. The original trustee. The man my parents said had retired. He answered on the 3rd ring. Walter Brennan was 78 years old. He had not retired. He had been pushed out. Serena, he said when I reached him. His voice was the same careful, measured instrument I remembered from my grandfather's funeral. I have been waiting for this call. You have been waiting. Your grandfather told me before he died that someday your parents would try to redirect the trust. He said, and I am quoting him, Douglas will find a way to give Serena's money to Garrett. When that happens, Serena will call you. Make sure you answer. I pulled over to the side of the road. I could not drive and process this at the same time. He predicted this. Arthur knew his son. He loved Douglas, but he was not blind to his priorities. That is why he set up the trust the way he did, with very specific protections. What protections? Can you come to my office? I think this conversation needs to happen in person. And bring whatever documentation you have about the trust transfer. Walter Brennan's office was not in a downtown high-rise. It was in his home. A stone colonial in Haverford, 3 miles from my parents' house. Books everywhere. Filing cabinets from the 1970s. a desk that looked like it had been built during the Eisenhower administration. He was thinner than I remembered, older. But his eyes had the same sharpness I recalled from every legal document he had ever explained to my grandfather in my presence. He poured me a cup of tea, then he opened a filing cabinet and pulled out a folder. Thick, red tab. "This is the original trust document," he said, "created by your grandfather on March 15th, 2014. I witnessed it, and I administered it for 7 years, until your father informed me in 2021 that he was assuming trusteeship." How did he assume trusteeship? Was there a legal process? Walter's expression hardened. "Your father sent me a letter on his firm's letterhead stating that as Serena's parent and the family's financial representative, he was exercising his right to assume administration of the trust pursuant to family financial consolidation. Is that legal?" "No." Walter set his teacup down firmly. "The trust document specifically names me as trustee and states that the trusteeship can only be transferred with the written consent of the beneficiary. That is you. Did you consent?" "Nobody asked me." "That is because your father never had the legal authority to take over this trust. He simply declared himself trustee, and the bank, which should have verified the authorization, accepted his letter without checking the original documents. So the transfer was illegal?" "The transfer was unauthorized, which means every action your father took as self-appointed trustee, including the distribution of $28,400 to Columbia University, was made without legal authority." Walter pulled out the original trust document. 3 pages, his handwriting in the margins, my grandfather's signature at the bottom. He pointed to a paragraph on page 2. "Read this," he said. "The funds held in this trust shall be used exclusively for the wedding expenses of the beneficiary, Serena Rose Whitfield. No portion of these funds shall be redirected, reassigned, or distributed for any other purpose. Any unauthorized distribution shall be considered a breach of fiduciary duty, and the responsible party shall be liable for the full amount plus damages." Plus damages. My grandfather had built a penalty clause into the trust. He had anticipated exactly what would happen, and he had made sure there were consequences. But Walter was not finished. He reached deeper into the folder and pulled out a second document. This one was newer, different paper, a different notary stamp. "What is that?" "This is an amendment your grandfather added 6 months before he died. September 2013. He called me to his house and asked me to add this provision. He handed it to me. 1 page. My grandfather's handwriting. Notarized. In the event that any member of the Whitfield family attempts to redirect, misappropriate, or otherwise interfere with the funds designated for Serena's wedding, the following shall apply. 1. The full trust amount shall be immediately restored from the personal assets of the party responsible. 2. An additional penalty of 50% of the trust value shall be assessed as damages. 3. A full accounting of the breach shall be presented publicly at the next family gathering to ensure transparency and accountability. I read it twice. Then, a third time. My grandfather had not just protected the money. He had built in a requirement for public accountability, a full accounting presented publicly at the next family gathering. He knew, Walter said softly. He knew Douglas would try this. He knew Diane would justify it, and he wanted to make sure that when it happened, they could not hide behind closed doors and polished excuses. I looked at Walter, this gentle, meticulous, 78-year-old man who had been holding my grandfather's last line of defense for over a decade. "What do we do now?" Walter opened his laptop, a concession to modernity that looked entirely out of place on his antique desk. "First, we notify the bank that your father's trusteeship was unauthorized and demand the immediate freezing of any remaining trust assets. Second, we send a formal demand letter to your parents requiring full restoration of the $28,400 plus the 50% penalty, which brings the total to $42,600. Third, we identify the next family gathering." He looked at me over his glasses. "Is there one coming up?" I thought about it, and then I almost smiled. Garrett's graduation from Columbia is in 14 months. May 2025. My parents are planning a reception. 400 guests, the entire mainline social circle. Walter closed his laptop. "That will do nicely." The next 14 months were an exercise in patience and precision. Walter sent the demand letter to my parents on June 1, 2024. Certified mail. Return receipt requested. The letter was 4 pages long. It cited the original trust document. It cited the unauthorized trusteeship transfer. It cited the specific provision prohibiting redistribution. It cited the amendment requiring public accountability. And it demanded full restoration of the trust amount, plus the 50% penalty within 60 days. Total demanded $42,600. My father called Walter within 24 hours. I know because Walter told me. Walter, this is a family matter. We can resolve this privately. There is no need for legal formalities. Douglas, I served your father for 37 years. He created this trust with specific conditions. You violated those conditions. This is not a family matter. It is a legal matter. And I intend to treat it as such. We will return the wedding money, the full $28,000. We will make it right. The trust requires the full amount plus the 50% penalty, $42,600, and it requires a public accounting at the next family gathering. Silence. Public accounting? That is absurd. We are not going to air family business in front of your father's words, Douglas, not mine. He anticipated this exact scenario, and he wrote the remedy himself. My father hung up. The 60 days passed. No payment was made. No contact from my parents. Just silence. Walter filed a formal complaint with the bank for accepting an unauthorized trusteeship transfer. The bank conducted an internal review and determined that Douglas Whitfield had never provided proper documentation for the trustee change. They sent a letter of apology to me and froze the trust account pending resolution. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding my wedding. Thomas had been extraordinary through all of it. When I told him what happened, he did not rage or threaten or make it about himself. He held my hands and said, "We will get married, Serena, whether it is at Haverford Estate or in my mother's backyard, or at the county clerk's office. The venue does not matter. You matter." We set a new date, October 12th, 2024, a Saturday. Thomas's mother offered her garden. It was small, beautiful, perfect. We invited 40 people instead of 120. I wore a dress I found at a consignment shop for $300. It was ivory silk with lace sleeves, and it fit like it had been waiting for me. We got married under a canopy of autumn leaves with Thomas's niece as the flower girl and my best friend Elena as the officiant because she had gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. It cost $4,200 total. My grandfather's trust was still frozen. My parents were not invited. Garrett did not know it was happening. It was the most beautiful day of my life, and not a single dollar of it came from the Whitfield family. But the story was not over, because Garrett's graduation was coming, and my grandfather's amendment was very clear about what needed to happen at the next family gathering. Walter and I spent months preparing. He gathered every document, the original trust, the amendment, the unauthorized trusteeship letter my father had sent, the bank's confirmation of the unauthorized transfer, the wire receipt showing the money sent to Columbia. He also found something else, something I had not expected. During his review of the trust account records, Walter discovered that my father had not just taken the $28,400 for Garrett's MBA, he had been making smaller withdrawals from the trust for years. $3,000 here, $2,000 there, always described in the account notes as administrative fees or trust maintenance costs. Total unauthorized withdrawals prior to the Columbia wire, $11,600. Over 7 years, my father had been skimming from my grandfather's trust, stealing from a dead man's gift to his granddaughter in amounts small enough to avoid attention but large enough to matter. Grand total, taken from the trust, $40,000, with the 50% penalty that brought the total owed to $60,000. Walter added every withdrawal to the accounting document, every date, every amount, every fake justification. We were ready. May 17th, 2025. The Marion Cricket Club, Haverford, Pennsylvania. My parents had rented the grand ballroom for Garrett's graduation reception. 400 guests. The entire mainline establishment, business partners from the firm, country club members, board members of the 3 nonprofits my mother chaired, politicians, judges, the kind of crowd that measured worth in handshakes and social visibility. Garrett had graduated from Columbia Business School 3 days earlier, MBA with distinction. My parents had spent the past 2 weeks telling everyone who would listen that their son was the future of Whitfield and Associates, the next generation, the heir apparent. I was not invited. Of course, My parents had not spoken to me since the demand letter. Garrett had texted me once in 14 months. A message that read, "Serena, I am sorry about the wedding thing, but Colombia is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You will understand someday." I did not respond. I did not need to. Because I was going to that graduation party, whether they invited me or not. Thomas drove. He wore his best suit, a navy blue 2-button he had bought for our wedding. I wore a black dress. Simple, professional. The dress of a woman who was not there to celebrate. Walter Brennan followed in his own car, 78 years old, driving himself, carrying a leather briefcase that contained every document my grandfather had ever created to protect me. We arrived at 7:15. The reception had started at 6. The ballroom was already full. Champagne, hors d'oeuvres, a jazz quartet playing standards. My mother's aesthetic rendered in real time. Every detail curated to project success and unity in the unassailable perfection of the Whitfield family. We walked in through the main entrance. No side doors, no service entrances. The front door, the first person who noticed me, was my Aunt Louise, my father's sister. She did a visible double take. "Serena? I did not know you were coming." Neither did anyone else. Word spread through the room the way it always does in crowds. Whispers, glances, the quiet recalibration of social dynamics when someone unexpected appears. My mother saw me from across the room. She was standing near the bar with 3 women I recognized from the country club board. Her champagne smile froze. Her eyes went wide, then narrow. She crossed the room in 8 seconds. I counted, "What are you doing here?" Her voice was low, controlled, the voice she used when she wanted to sound reasonable while being threatening. "I am attending a family gathering. You were not invited. Grandpa Arthur's trust amendment does not require an invitation. It requires a family gathering. This qualifies." The color drained from her face. She looked past me and saw Walter standing by the door, his briefcase in his hand, his expression neutral. "You brought the lawyer? Serena, if you think." My father appeared beside her. His face was already flushed, whether from champagne or anger I could not tell. "Serena, this is Garrett's evening. Whatever grievance you think you have, this is not a grievance, Dad. This is an accounting, required by the terms of a trust you violated, created by a man whose wishes you ignored." I looked at both of them. These 2 people who had spent 29 years prioritizing their son at my expense, who had stolen my wedding money and called it an investment, who had skimmed from a dead man's trust and called it administrative fees. "We can do this privately in a back room, or we can do it the way Grandpa Arthur specified, publicly, at the next family gathering, in front of everyone who matters to you. Your choice." My father's jaw tightened. My mother's hand gripped her champagne glass so hard I thought it might shatter. 5 minutes, my father said. "The private dining room. Now." "No," I said. "Grandpa Arthur's amendment is very specific. Public accountability, full accounting, at the family gathering, not behind closed doors." Walter stepped forward. His voice carried the quiet authority of a man who had spent 5 decades practicing law and had never once bluffed. "Douglas, the trust document is unambiguous. Arthur's amendment requires public disclosure. If you refuse to comply voluntarily, I will file a motion in Orphans Court on Monday, and the disclosure will happen there instead, in front of a judge, with reporters present. Your choice." My father looked at the room. 400 people. His clients, his colleagues, his social world. He looked at my mother. She was shaking her head. "Not here, not now, not like this." But they had no choice. My grandfather had made sure of that. "Before we continue, I want to pause and ask you something. Have you ever been the child whose dreams were canceled to fund someone else's ambitions? Have you ever watched your parents pour everything into a sibling while telling you to be grateful for whatever was left over? Tell me in the comments, because this kind of favoritism is not just unfair. It is a wound that shapes everything you become, and the first step to healing it is saying it out loud. And if you want to see what happened when Walter read the accounting in front of 400 people, when my brother heard exactly how his MBA was funded, and the moment my father tried to explain himself and the room turned against him, hit subscribe and keep watching, because what happened on that stage is something the main line will be talking about for years. My father made his choice. He chose the private dining room over the main stage. Walter accepted the compromise on one condition. The doors would remain open. Anyone who wanted to listen could listen. Within 5 minutes of us entering the private dining room, 60 of them had gathered in the doorway and the hallway beyond. Word travels fast in a crowd that feeds on information, the way the main line feeds on status. My mother sat at the head of a long mahogany table. My father stood behind her, his hand on the back of her chair, a protective gesture that looked more like a man bracing himself against a wall. Garrett was summoned from the ballroom. He arrived confused, still holding a glass of champagne. His Columbia tie loosened slightly. He looked at me, then at Walter, then at our parents. "What is going on?" "Your sister has raised a matter regarding your grandfather's trust," my father said. His voice was tight. "We are going to address it briefly and then return to the celebration." Walter opened his briefcase. He did not rush. He did not perform. He simply laid out the documents on the table the way he had laid out documents for my grandfather for 37 years, with precision, with respect, with the quiet understanding that the truth does not need decoration. He began. On March 15, 2014, Arthur Whitfield established a testamentary trust for the benefit of his granddaughter, Serena Rose Whitfield. The trust was funded with $28,400 and was designated exclusively for Serena's wedding expenses. I was named as trustee. He placed the original trust document on the table. In 2021, Douglas Whitfield sent a letter to the administering bank claiming authority to assume trusteeship of this trust. No legal process was followed. No court authorization was obtained. The beneficiary was not notified or consulted. The bank accepted the letter without verification. He placed the unauthorized trusteeship letter on the table. Between 2021 and 2024, Douglas Whitfield made multiple unauthorized withdrawals from the trust. $11,600 in withdrawals described as administrative fees and trust maintenance costs. These descriptions were fabricated. No administrative services were provided. No maintenance was performed. The money was simply taken. My father shifted behind my mother's chair. His face had gone from flushed to gray. On May 28, 2024, Douglas Whitfield authorized a wire transfer of $28,400 from the trust account to Columbia University for the first semester MBA tuition of Garrett Whitfield. On the same day, Diane Whitfield contacted 7 wedding vendors and canceled all contracts for Serena's wedding scheduled for June 21st, requesting that deposit refunds be sent to her personal address. Walter paused. He looked at Garrett. The total amount removed from Serena's trust is $40,000. The original $28,400 wedding fund, plus $11,600 in fraudulent administrative withdrawals over 3 years. Garrett set his champagne glass on the table. His hand was unsteady. "I did not know about the other withdrawals," he said. His voice was thin. "Mom and Dad said the trust had extra funds that were not designated, and every dollar in that trust was designated." Walter's tone did not change. It did not need to. "Your grandfather's document is unambiguous. The funds were for Serena's wedding, all of them, and your grandfather anticipated that someone in this family would attempt to redirect them." He placed the amendment on the table, the single page my grandfather had added 6 months before he died, the page that required public accountability. Walter read it aloud. Every word. The room beyond the open doors had gone silent. I could see faces in the hallway, business partners, country club members, people who had known my grandfather, people who respected his name. In the event that any member of the Whitfield family attempts to redirect, misappropriate, or otherwise interfere with the funds designated for Serena's wedding, the following shall apply. 1. The full trust amount shall be immediately restored from the personal assets of the party responsible. 2. An additional penalty of 50% of the trust value shall be assessed as damages. 3. A full accounting of the breach shall be presented publicly at the next family gathering to ensure transparency and accountability. Walter set down the document. Arthur Whitfield loved his family. He loved his grandchildren, both of them. But he was not naive. He knew that in families where one child is consistently prioritized, the other child's interests are often sacrificed. He created this amendment to ensure that if that sacrifice occurred, it would not happen in silence. He looked at my father. "Douglas, the trust requires full restoration of $40,000 plus the 50% penalty. The total owed to Serena is $60,000. You have 30 days to comply." The silence in that room was absolute. 60 people in the doorway. Not one of them made a sound. Then someone in the hallway spoke. A man's voice. I recognized it. Edward Callahan. One of my grandfather's oldest clients. A man who had trusted the Whitfield firm with his family's wealth for 3 decades. Douglas, is this true? Did you take money from Arthur's trust? My father could not answer. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Edward's voice again. Harder now. Douglas, I asked you a question. My mother stood. This is a private family matter, and we would appreciate. It stopped being private when you stole from a trust Arthur created for his granddaughter. Edward stepped into the doorway. I knew Arthur Whitfield for 41 years. He was the most honest man I ever met. And you took his last gift to his granddaughter and spent it on business school tuition? The murmurs in the hallway became a roar. Other voices joined. Arthur would be devastated. I cannot believe Douglas would do this. That trust was sacred. Arthur talked about it. He told me about it years ago. Garrett stood. His face was white. He looked at our parents with an expression I had never seen from him before. Not the golden child's confidence. Not the heir apparent's certainty. Something broken. You told me the money was available, he said to our father. You said it was extra funds from the estate. You said Grandpa would have wanted it used for my education. My father finally found his voice. He would have. Arthur always believed in investing in the future of this family. He invested in Serena's future. Walter's response was immediate. Specifically, exclusively, in writing. Notarized, with penalties for exactly what you did. Arthur did not leave that money for the family. He left it for her. Garrett walked out of the reception at 8:15. He did not say goodbye to the guests. He did not thank the people who had come to celebrate his graduation. He walked through the ballroom, past 400 people who were now whispering about his family instead of toasting his success, and out the front door of the Marion Cricket Club. He called me the next morning. 7 a.m. His voice was raw. I did not know Serena. I swear to you, Mom and Dad told me the money was available. They said Grandpa's estate had discretionary funds. They never told me it was your wedding trust. I wanted to believe him. Part of me did. Garrett was many things. Privileged, oblivious, entitled. But he was not deliberately cruel. He had simply never been required to question where his advantages came from. That does not fix what happened, I said. I know. Long pause. I have been thinking all night about the private school, the summer programs, Villanova, Columbia, all of it. I never once asked how it was paid for. I just assumed I deserved it. Another pause. You worked at a frozen yogurt shop while I attended leadership camp at Wharton. You took out student loans while Mom and Dad wrote checks for my tuition, and I never questioned it. Not once. No, you did not. I am going to pay you back. Not the legal penalty, that is, on Mom and Dad, but the $28,400, the wedding money. I will figure out how. It might take time, but I will do it. I did not respond immediately. I let the silence sit between us. 29 years of being second. 29 years of managing. 29 years of watching my brother receive everything, while I received the expectation to be grateful. Okay, I finally said. But Garrett, paying me back is not the same as understanding what happened. The money is the least of it. I know. His voice cracked. I know that now. My parents did not call. They did not write. They did not send a representative or a lawyer or a carefully worded letter of apology. They retreated into the silence of people whose public image has been shattered. Within a week, the fallout reached Whitfield and Associates. Edward Callahan withdrew his account, $3.2 million in managed assets. His letter to my father read, I trusted your firm because I trusted your father. That trust has been broken. 2 more clients followed within a month. Combined withdrawals of $5.8 million. Not catastrophic for a firm managing over $200 million. But the signal was devastating. The Whitfield name, the name my grandfather had spent 50 years building, now carried a footnote. The Marion Cricket Club board requested a meeting with my father. Not a disciplinary hearing. A conversation. The kind of conversation that in mainline culture is worse than any formal action, because it communicates that you have become a topic of discussion rather than a member of standing. My mother resigned from 2 of her 3 nonprofit boards. Health reasons. She told people. Nobody believed her. The 3rd board did not ask her to resign. They simply stopped including her in meeting invitations. Walter filed the formal demand with the Orphans Court Division of the Montgomery County Court of Common Pleas on June 1, 2025. The filing required my father to restore the full trust amount plus the 50% penalty within 30 days, or face a court-ordered judgment. My father's attorney, a man named Philip Hartwell, contacted Walter to negotiate. My clients are prepared to restore the original trust amount of $28,400. They dispute the additional withdrawals and the penalty provision. Walter's response was brief. The trust document is not a negotiation. It is a legal instrument. Your clients violated it. The penalty applies. $40,000 in unauthorized withdrawals, $20,000 in penalties, total $60,000. 30 days. Philip Hartwell called back the next day. His clients would comply. Full amount, $60,000, wired within 2 weeks. The money arrived on June 14th, $60,000, deposited into the restored trust account, now properly administered by Walter Brennan as my grandfather had always intended. I sat at my kitchen table in the apartment Thomas and I shared in Narberth, the same table where he had proposed, the one that had finally been delivered 3 months after the night he got on his knees on the bare floor. Thomas sat across from me. He had made coffee. He always made coffee when something important was happening. His way of saying, I am here, without using words. What do you want to do with it? He asked. I thought about it. $28,400 was my grandfather's gift. The remaining $31,600 was the penalty my parents owed for violating his trust. 2 different kinds of money, one given with love, one extracted through accountability. I want to do what Grandpa would have done, I said. I put the original $28,400 into a savings account. For our future. For a house someday. For the life my grandfather wanted me to have. The $31,600 I donated. Half to a scholarship fund for first-generation college students at Westchester University, my alma mater. Half to a legal aid organization that helps people recover stolen inheritances and mismanaged trusts. I called it the Arthur Whitfield Fund. Walter helped me set it up. He said it was the most meaningful legal document he had drafted since my grandfather's original trust. Garrett kept his promise. Over the following 12 months, he sent me monthly payments. Not large amounts, between $500 and $800 a month. Whatever he could manage on a new MBA graduate salary. He got a job at a financial consulting firm in Philadelphia, not Whitfield and Associates. He told my parents he would not join the firm until the trust matter was fully resolved. That decision cost him more than money. It cost him his position in the family hierarchy. My mother called it ungrateful. My father called it short-sighted. Garrett called it the first honest decision he had ever made. We had lunch once a month, Garrett and I, at a diner in Bryn Mawr that served terrible coffee and excellent pancakes. We did not talk about the trust or the money or the graduation party. We talked about his job, my life with Thomas, the apartment he had rented, the girl he was dating. We talked like siblings, maybe for the first time. It was not the relationship we should have had growing up. It was not the easy closeness of children raised equally. It was something newer, more fragile, built on the wreckage of 3 decades of favoritism and the cautious hope that we could become something better. My parents remained silent. My mother sent a Christmas card. Generic, unsigned except for her name. My father sent nothing. The firm continued to operate, though 2 more clients quietly transitioned to other advisors over the following year. I did not celebrate their losses. I did not track their decline. I simply stopped organizing my life around their approval. Walter Brennan retired for real in September 2025. He was 79. He called me on his last day of practice. Serena, your grandfather was the finest man I ever represented, and you are the finest legacy he could have left. He paused. Take care of that fund. It matters more than you know. I will, Walter. I promise. Some promises are worth keeping. That one is at the top of my list. It has been a year since the graduation party. I am 29 years old. I live in Narberth with Thomas. We have a small garden, a used car, a dining table that finally has chairs around it. Thomas teaches history at a public school in Lower Merion. I work as a financial consultant specializing in trust administration and estate planning. My clients are people who have been through what I went through. People whose families treated their inheritance like a shared resource instead of a sacred gift. I am good at this work, not because I studied it in school, because I lived it. On my desk is a framed photograph. My grandfather and me on his porch in Gray's Lane. I am 7 years old. He is holding a glass of lemonade and laughing at something I said. I do not remember what it was, but I remember the way his laughter made me feel, like I was enough, like I mattered. That is what this story is really about. Not the money, not the trust, not the courtroom or the graduation party or the 400 people who watched my family's carefully constructed image collapse. It is about a man who saw his granddaughter clearly, who loved her without conditions, who understood that the family he had built would not always protect the people it should, and who spent his final years making sure that when the moment came, when his son chose his grandson over his granddaughter, the truth would not be buried behind polished excuses and closed doors. My grandfather could not stop my parents from taking the money, but he made sure they could not take it quietly. If you are still listening, let me leave you with this. I spent 29 years being the manageable child, the one who was expected to figure things out on her own, the one whose dreams were treated as optional while her brother's ambitions were treated as essential. I was not the child they invested in. I was the child they withdrew from. And for a long time, I believed that meant something was wrong with me, that I was less valuable, less worthy, less deserving of the things my brother received without question. I was wrong. Nothing was wrong with me. Something was wrong with the system I was raised in, a system that measured a daughter's worth by how much she was willing to sacrifice, and a son's worth by how much he was given. If your family has ever made you feel like your dreams are less important than someone else's, like your future is a resource to be redirected whenever a sibling needs funding, like your role in the family is to manage while others are managed for, I need you to hear this. Your dreams are not negotiable. Your future is not a line item on someone else's budget. And the people who cancel your plans to fund someone else's ambitions are not investing in the family. They are investing in a hierarchy, and you are not at the top of it. But here is the thing about hierarchies. They only work if everyone agrees to stay in their assigned position. The moment you step out of line, the moment you refuse to be the manageable one, the whole structure trembles. My grandfather understood this. That is why he built the trust the way he did, not just with money, with accountability, with transparency, with the insistence that if his granddaughter was wronged, the wrong would be named, documented, and spoken aloud in front of everyone who needed to hear it. He could not give me a family that treated me equally, but he gave me something better. He gave me proof that I was worth protecting, written in his own hand, notarized, filed, permanent, and nobody can ever cancel that. Thank you for listening to my story. If it meant something to you, if it reminded you that your worth is not determined by where you fall in your family's hierarchy, share it, like, subscribe, leave a comment telling me what you would have done. Because everyone deserves a grandfather who sees them. And if you did not have one, let this story be the reminder that someone, somewhere, believes you are worth fighting for. You are. You always were.